Welcome to working with Photoshop and embossing. Well, just to begin with, where I am right at the start is I'm actually in Illustrator. And what I've got here is just a series of vector illustrations. And these illustrations are a little bit smaller than what I need, but in terms of the size I'm going to do my job at, but of course they're vectors, so they're totally scalable. So it's a lot easier to create work in Illustrator first, particularly when you're doing this sort of type or embossing logo type effect. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, probably because it's mainly a thicker line, which is probably going to work the best for this. So I'm just going to select this graphic here, and I'm just going to go and edit and copy, just so I've got it in the clipboard. Then what I'm going to do is bring it into Photoshop, and I'm going to create an embossing effect. You can actually have it raised or embossed, but nonetheless, this is what I'm going to do. So it's into Photoshop. I'm going to create this sort of effect with a logo, so it's totally non-destructive. Not only is it totally non-destructive, but you can also use it in a variety of ways because we're using alpha channels, as you can see here, and a range of layers, so it's non-destructive. Just for example, I might like to turn on a background effect, so I've got my background effect in here. I might even want to turn on this chrome background, or turn this one back off again, etc. So you can see that I can put any background, a whole range of backgrounds, and maybe offer these up as an example for a client, and it's totally non-destructive. So it's a great way to work, easy to make changes, because we're loading everything with an alpha channel. So this is just using an embossing effect. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go through and basically, I'll just turn that one off and come back to here, create something like this. So how do we do it? Well, the first thing, what I'm going to do is I've actually copied from Illustrator this graphic. And what I've got here is, I can even turn these two layers off. I've got my smart object because we're going to create one of those first, just so really we can scale things. But I can delete these, I don't actually need them anymore, but I just want to take you through an easy process. So the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here and just create a new file. I'll just call this Kiwi logo, just to make sure, or actually probably just so I've got something different. I'll call it Kiwi logo 2, just for example. Okay, now what I want to do is this stage, I'm going to bring in my graphic, my smart object being a vector graphic, but I'm just going to make just a nice good quality for this particular one, say good screen video quality. So I'm going to just make that, say, just a 1080 size format, 1920 by 1080 pixels. Just RGB, that's all I want. White, oh yes, I'll just leave it white, there's no problems, and I'll just go OK. So anyway, here's my brand new file at the moment, just channels, nothing in there. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to bring in my smart object. So just go edit, paste. I could bring in as pixels, a path, but for this one I just want a smart object. So I'm just going to go OK. The reason is I just want to actually just scale it up. So I'm just going to hold my Option and Shift key and just scale up to a size to make it sort of nice and chunky for what I want to do. And that's my file here. So if I just accept that, as you can see, it's a smart object. Now, whether it's in a channel, this being this graphic, or being a layer, it doesn't matter. I can still load that channel. And that's what I want to do for the purposes of this, because I actually don't need these files really anymore after I load them anyway. So I'm going to hold my Command key, Control on a PC, and I'm just going to load that selection. Then I'm going to go over to my channels here. I'll create a new channel. Here it comes through here, and I want to fill it with white. So just Option, Delete. Okay, I've got white, nice sharp object here, and basically I can just deselect that. So Command D, Control D on a PC, or select, just deselect here. And basically what we've got here is our graphic good to go. Now I'm just going to load that again, and this is where I'll use it from now on. I don't need any of the files, so I'm going to just load this like so. and it's loaded. I might just actually just give it a name to keep things a little bit more organized. Return that, and I'm going to come back to my layers here. Okay, and just click on this background layer here. Now, as I said, I actually don't need these files anymore, but so what I'm going to do for a start is I'm going to go through and I'm going to create, I'll turn this off so we know that we're not using these. I'm going to create a new background. So I'm just going to create a new layer here, and I'll bring this up to the top. I'm just going to call this Kiwi. Okay. And with this Kiwi, what I want to do now is I want to fill it with black. So Option Delete or Alt Delete to fill it with the foreground color, but if you hold the Command key on a Mac anyway and then go delete, it actually, just when I bring it over here, so Command Delete, provided I'm on the right layer here, and I'll just call it Kiwi. Return that, so I'm just off it, and now just go Command Delete, and that will fill it with that color. And I can just deselect it now, so I'm just going to go Command D. Okay, and to get rid of this little box, I'm just going to click down here in the grey. So that's what we've got here. This is how we're going to use this graphic. These other two files I do not need anymore. Now what I do need to do is I want to create sort of a textured background. And what we're going to do is use gradients for that. So I'm going to just turn this off just so it doesn't get in the way for the time being. We'll come back and use this in a minute. But what I do want is just another layer here, and it's going to be called background. I'll just call it BG. Return this time, and I'm just going to drag this beneath the Kiwi. Okay? Or any logo that you might be working with. So what I want to do now is I'm going to go and use my gradients. So I'll click on the gradient tool here just to bring it up, and I've got my Chrome from the last time I used that. But what we want to do is create our own gradient. So instead of clicking down on the list down here, I want you to click in the area here. So just click right in here, and this brings up your palette here. Now what I've got down here is, if I go right down to the bottom here, I've got this Kiwi graphic that's loaded in here and created. Now what you'll probably see when we're just looking at normal gradients, small gradients, you'll probably see them like that, which is fine, but if you want to name them or see what the names are, I'm just going to go to my small list here, just to show you and keep the job just the same. What I actually did, I actually went in and used, I think it was copper, and when you've got a graphic here, you can actually just click like so, click on the color, or I can click down here on the color, or just double click, and I'm just going to just warm that up just a little bit, and that looks great. This is where you can control how smooth it's going to go, so you can move these anywhere you want. And if you want to bring up an alpha channel, this is where you can actually make it transparent as well, but I want to leave it at 100% for this example. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call this Kiwi 2, just so it's slightly different. Kiwi 2, and just with that I'll just go new. Okay, now here's my Kiwi 2 just in here. Now what you can do, you can also save, and in fact I'll just show you quickly how this works. If I save this here, I can save it off as a gradient, give it a name. I'll call it test, for example. Okay, and I'll just save it. I can save it anywhere I want really, but it's just in the gradients folder, which is convenient within the Photoshop folder. So I'll just save that like so, and then I can go load, and then I can load any of the gradients that I've created and saved off. So therefore, if you want to share a particular gradient with anybody else in the world, you can do that and just send the file over, and they can just load it into their Photoshop. So I'll just go cancel for the time being. The main thing is I've got my Kiwi 2 at the moment. So that's great. What I'm going to do now is just my gradient tool. So I'm on the gradients, of course. I'm just going to drag that on a nice little angle. I want to create a bit of a texture. So I've got my gradient here, but to give it a bit of effect, I want a sort of almost wooden or brush steel effect. I'm going to go up to my filter. I'm going to come down on here, and I'm just going to go to blur. And what I want to do is go to, before I go to blur, one little thing I better get right first is we can't blur a blurry thing, it won't really make much difference. Might make it a bit softer, but what we need is some texture. So I'm going to go and add some noise in here. So I'll click on add the noise. I might bring it up a bit more just to make something really obvious this time, and I'm going to go OK. So I've got a good texture. Now I'm going to go back to my filter and I'm going to go to blur, but I'm going to go to motion blur. Okay, and what I've got here is it just on a horizontal angle. You can have any texture you want and make it faster and faster until you really start getting some texture coming through here. So I'm going to just keep the brush deal effect in here like so, but as I say, you can move it to any angle like this, and but I'm just going to keep it for this one just 0 and just go OK. So I've got my brush deal effect here. So this is the background we're working with for the effect. Now I'm not going to destroy this background. This is why we're using alpha channels. In fact, we're using the graphic we've already created with our first alpha channel. So I'm going to turn this back on now, and what I want to do is create an embossing effect. Okay, to do this, we go up, making sure our layer is selected, and we go from the filter here, we go down to stylize, and we go to emboss, and I'll click on that. And here's my nice little embossing. Now, it doesn't look that good, does it? But this is where we start off from. Now, the first thing I've got here is you can actually have it height or width, whatever you want. But it's looking a little bit sharp. Now, you see on the edges here, in fact, what you can do is you can click anywhere you want. You can see how sharp it looks. So for a start, that's really not the best of things I want to work with. I probably want a bit more height, but if it's too sharp, it actually can look a little bit unreal. So I'm just going to go cancel for a second. While it's still on the black, I want to give that a little bit of a blur. So what you do is you simply go back under your filter. We're just going to use a Gaussian blur for this one. So just under Gaussian blur, come back here. That smile's too far. I just want about 1, close to. Oh, that looks perfect. See how soft that is? Just a little bit of a soft edge around here. So that's going to actually do a better job if you first soften it before you emboss it. So if I go OK now, then we go back to our filter. We come back in to stylize, and now we go to emboss. And it's actually just a little bit softer, which is going to help. Now, the other thing I've got is I want to make it look like it's embossed, so the light is coming from this direction. So therefore you're going to get a little bit of a ping of light on this edge. If you do it the other way, it'll look like it's raised up, which if you're doing a raised up type effect, then that can be equally worthwhile as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to accept that. That's pretty good. I've got about a height of 10 because I'm going to add more depth later. And I'll just click OK. So we've got our embossed effect, which we've got this horrible grey, which certainly doesn't do the job too well. So whenever you want to get rid of the grey, what we do is we go to a blending mode here. So it says normal. We're going to use an overlay. Overlay will basically, if it's darker than 50%, it goes, it's visible and goes dark. And if it's lighter than 50%, it'll go white. If it's in the middle, it'll just disappear, which is, this is a 50 grey. So let's have a look at that. So down to overlay, and voila, that's gone. It certainly doesn't work totally as we'd like yet, but still it's well on the way. The next thing, we just want to give it a little bit more depth, or not depth, but depth in tone, so darker in other words. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my channels, command click on my Kiwi graphic here. I've loaded this channel. Come back to my layers, making sure I'm on my Kiwi layer here, and just down the bottom here, this is basically just an adjustment layer icon. If I click on that, it should, oh that's better, come up, and we just want levels. Click on level. What I'm going to do is I just want to darken that area a little bit. We've made that selection, so to darken it you can just bring it in. Oh, actually, I'm just going the wrong way. This is the top here. Just darken it. See how it's darkening in there a little bit? Not too much, just to give it a bit more obvious tone there. That looks good, so I'll just close that now. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I want to really start playing around with the embossing. So an easy way to do this, as I mentioned, this is quick and non-destructive. I'm going to come back to my special effects and see if I can bring them up here. I just want to get bevel and emboss. Now if I just click on that, straight away we're starting to get this effect working better. So depth, size, I might just bring up the depth a bit more. See how it's actually starting to give a better look at the size, maybe a bit more size, a little bit too much at this stage. So that's sort of looking pretty good. Now another thing you can do if you want to make it look like it's sort of having a chisel type effect, just for example I might make the size a little bit bigger there, and it's like being chiseled in. I'm going to go from smooth here to soft chisel. And you can see that sometimes if you're working with wood or kind of trying to create an effect like that, you can actually do it quite well with just the software here. Okay, you can change that around to just get it suiting just nicely. But for my example, what I want to do is I just want to keep it smooth. Okay, so that's looking pretty good at the moment. I might even just bring the size down just a little bit more for me at this stage. But as you can see, just a touch more down. Almost there, that's about it. But you know, feel free to play around. Maybe I'll just make it 10's perfect. Okay, so I'll just go OK. So we've got our graphic in here. So we're well on the way, but we're not quite there yet. Okay, the next thing, what we want to do is, for a start, I think I better just save that. So I'll just say that because obviously the worst, or most of the time, you use quite a bit of memory. Now just to explain a little bit about memory, what you'll find is that down here, just in that little menu, you can actually look at scratch sizes. Okay, scratch sizes will show you the amount of memory that you're using with a small job. This is not a particularly big one. If I just go and click on scratch sizes, you can actually see that it requires 1.09 gigabyte to work with. Okay, and in fact you have the left and the right hand side of how big the file is. It's not particularly big here, but actually it's actually quite 4.51 gig I think there, so goodness me, you do want to keep the left smaller than the right. If it does get up above the right hand side, you look out, you're going to crash probably. But it just shows you the small file size, only 1920 by 1080 high. It's using an enormous amount of memory. So just check your scratch sizes. And a lot of illustrators will have if they're doing big files, sometimes will have a scratch disk, just a hard drive, just purely for calculations. Okay, I might as well just leave it on that so you can see where that is. But what I want to do is I'm going to create another layer now. I'm going to create a shadow effect. So if I just create a layer above that, I'll call it shadow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it with black. Okay, now foreground to fill it is Option Delete or Alt Delete on a PC. But background is on a Mac is Command Delete. So if I just go Command Delete, I've filled that layer with black. Now obviously black is not what I want, it's a little bit too dark. I'm just in normal mode here, but I'm just going to slide that down maybe to about, I'll just go to about 40%. Now we can change it any stage, even when we've sort of finished the file, if it's too dark or too light. In fact, I might just, so it's a little bit more obvious, just take a bit darker for now. So it's definitely darker, and I want to create the illusion of a deeper shadow. This is where we're making it look etched in even further. So to do that, all I need to do is I'm going to go back to my channels here. You guessed it, just load the channel. Okay, and what I'm going to do is simply delete this. Okay, so I'll go back to my channels, make sure I'm on my shadow layer here, and I'm just going to click delete. Okay, and just deselect it. Now what I want to do is go to the move tool up the top here, and I'm just going to drag this layer just down a little bit, just to make it look like it's got more depth to it. Okay, and that looks pretty good there actually. Yeah, not too bad. Okay, so I've just got a bit of depth, just shows you there's more depth in this file. That's why I didn't want to take the bevel in too far. But of course, the whole beauty, or really to show depth of field, is you get different degrees of sharpness to softness, which relates to showing that there's depth between foreground and background, that sort of thing. And the same applies in this case. You want to have a softer shadow. So with this layer still selected, I'm just going to simply go up, go to my filter, just going to go to blur, and one of my favorite blurs is this Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to wind this out quite a bit. Okay, you see how it's getting nice and soft now. I might just take it down a little bit. 4.8, that looks pretty good there, but it just definitely gives it a bit more depth to the file. And I'll just go OK. Right, now of course we don't want all this extraneous tone, we want to get rid of that. So you probably guessed it. I'm going to go back to my channels here and just Command click on that to load the channel, making sure I'm just in my channels here, and I'm just going to go through there and do what's called just a layer mask. So if I click on that, it's actually hasn't destroyed it, so it's non-destructive. I've just added this little bit of extra shadow in here, and just to give that extra depth. So just to bring up a little bit more ping, you might just want to take the shadow, and I'm just going to take it beneath the kiwi there. See, it gives it more highlight. Feel free to drag your layers anywhere you want, and that's the whole beauty. Totally non-destructive. If there's any changes, whether you're doing it for a commercial job or just want to finesse it for yourself where there's going to be changes, make it easy on yourself. Non-destructive is a great way to work, and of course that's why Photoshop's a great tool. Now with this background, at any stage, I'm just going to quickly add one more in there. We can bring all sorts of graphics into this file, but I'm just going to create one more layer, and I'm going to go back to my layer effects here, and I'm just going to go to this chromey one like I was on before, and this time I'm just going to click straight down and hold my shift key just to keep it totally constrained here. So as you see, that's coming like so, a little bit too sharp for my liking. So a good old filter here, I'm going to go back to my blur, Gaussian blur, and 4.9, I might drag it up a bit more than that. Looks pretty good. Okay, so now we've got a very metallic type feel. So easy to work with using this method. And of course, if we want to have that within the graphic or without the graphic, I'll do it the other way around this time. I'm just going to call that Chrome. And you guessed it, I'm going to go and load my channel here, Command click, being a Mac. Come back to my layers, making sure I'm on my Chrome here. And this time I'm going to do it the other way. So I'm going to go and reverse this. So I'm going to use Command Shift I, and you see it's reversing the selection now. Okay, just an inverse of the selection. Command Shift I, and now I'm just going to add in my masking effect here. So just layer mask and click, and you see we've locked off the inner, and we've just left the background. So very simple. As you can see, you can have as many of these as you want in order to get the right sort of effect. And of course we don't need our vector or smart object or even this background. I could delete them off, as I mentioned before. A great way, simple way to work. So thanks for watching.